Well, we're back trying to preview one team going to the World Cup every single day until the World Cup gets here. It's like a month and a half worth of teams. And before we dive into today's wonderful team, I do have a disclosure to make. Even though I never claim to be any sort of expert, I'm just another guy that likes watching ball and sits here and talks about stuff. I have misfired on a couple of things recently. Even though Zealand took over the channel while he was doing his 100-hour stream, I was doing my own very exhausting thing that contributed to sleep deprivation. I know that might seem suspicious to some of you, but maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I've misfired on a couple of things recently. I hope you can forgive me because again, I am not, this is just something that I'm able to kind of sit here and do in my free time, like we're sitting at a lunch table talking about these teams. I just like talking about this stuff, but I am aware that Sully Montari played for Ghana and not Ivory Coast, and that Inter Valencia didn't play for Inter in Italy. I have no idea what was going on with my brain the last couple days, but most of those previews were sound, solid, and high level, whatever the fuck this is, whatever we're doing. But I'm locked back in. I'm locked the fuck in for this one because this one's in my own backyard. All right, this is a CONCACAF nation, and it's the one that nobody knows anything about. It's Curaçao. Right, the team that drawn into a group with Germany, Ivory Coast, and Ecuador, three fantastic teams, two dark horse candidates, and one of the giants of the game, are completely lost in Group E. And maybe that's why you're here. Maybe even as an enjoyer of this channel or somebody that's watching this entire series for better or worse, this is one of those teams you just know jack shit about. Who is Curaçao? What is Curaçao? And most importantly, why is Curaçao? Well, the why is because they wanted to go out on their own and stop being tied to what was called the Netherlands Antilles. Okay, if Curaçao feels like a made-up national team or a new national team, that's because it is. All right, now they participated in one World Cup qualifying as the territory of Curaçao in 1958, because Curaçao is, it's important to note, part of the Kingdom of the Netherlands. Now, there are three, count them, three islands in a chain right above South America that are part of the Caribbean and what are called like the Dutch West Indies, basically. Like they are the ABC Islands is what we would call them in Florida, which is an honorary part of the Caribbean where I grew up. It's the Dutch part of the Caribbean. It's not the only Dutch part of the Caribbean. They got like St. Martin and but it's three islands by themselves, and it's Aruba, Bonaire, and Curaçao. Okay, and they competed together as the Netherlands Antilles from 1962 to 2010 and did, and I quote, from me, jack shit. They didn't do anything. Okay, they didn't even, I'm talking about, like, they didn't even make the Gold Cup, dog. Their last Gold Cup participation or CONCACAF, like, competitive championship was in 1973 before Curaçao struck out on its own. All three of them did. Aruba is also a part of FIFA. Bonaire is not. They've kind of elected to just stop doing the whole football thing entirely. Aruba is actually where one of the great Dutch players right now, Denzel Dumfries, is from. He's from Aruba. He's capped for Aruba. He switched to the Netherlands. And that is an option that is on the table for every member of this Curaçao national team because like a Scotland, like a Wales, a Northern Ireland, then there's a host of other examples, right? This is a national team that does have a chance to make the World Cup itself, but is a part of another country. And so if you're there, you've got citizenship in that other country. As a result, there's a very heavy Dutch flavor to this team. In fact, half of the population of like available Curaçaoan players lives in the Netherlands. Fun fact, that's about 150,000 people. There are about 140,000 people on the island of Curaçao, combining for a grand total of 290,000-ish people that are eligible to play for this national team, which conveniently would still break the world record for the smallest nation to ever qualify for a World Cup. So anybody saying, well, it was easy for them to qualify, they got the Dutch, bullshit. Even if you take all of the Dutch Curaçaoans, you are still looking at the smallest nation to ever go to a World Cup. So they absolutely deserve credit for that. And the fact that this national team has only been participating in tournaments and shit as its own thing. Like you think about what it takes to create a new FA, a new football association, to be able to build up youth teams into a senior national team, right? Their first World Cup qualifying cycle was for the World Cup in Brazil in 2014. The vast majority of people that are watching this right now were very much alive and functional human beings when the Curaçao national team played its very first game. That is just a rare thing to be interacting with. As such, they've kind of hit the jackpot and done this about as quickly as you possibly could. This was their 4th ever World Cup qualification as a nation. 4th ever. Right? And real sickos for the international game like me had Curaçao circled as like, if there's literally one team on the face of the earth that could break Iceland's record, Curaçao was really the only reasonable option. They were the only one. They were the only one with a chance, and they did it as fast as possible. They'd never won over 3 games in all of qualifying in CONCACAF. They won 7 in this qualifying cycle. And this qualifying cycle was a masterclass from this Curaçaoan team. They won every game in their preliminary final, their second to last round of qualifying, including a win over Haiti in World Cup qualifying. You might recognize Haiti as being the team that knocked out both Costa Rica and Honduras en route to making their first World Cup in a long time. But at the time, when they beat Haiti, was the first time I went, all right, because they'd already started making gold cups. This is how I knew of them. They made the quarterfinals of the Gold Cup in 2019. They didn't qualify in 2023, but they made it back and got 2 points in the group stage with a couple of draws in 2025. It was a very respectable effort at the CONCACAF Championship. The 2 draws were against Honduras and El Salvador, 2 teams that I would have looked at that had a better chance to make the World Cup than Curaçao going into this cycle. Right? But when they beat Haiti, I sat up in my chair and I went, oh shit. And then when the groups were drawn, I went, oh shit again. Because there were 3 qualifying groups at the final stage of this CONCACAF qualifying style, right? There usually are 3 final groups. You just slot Canada, Mexico, and the United States in here somewhere, right? But Curaçao's group was the easiest. Bermuda, by far, like by magnitudes, is the worst team to somehow fall backwards into this group stage, demonstrated by a minus 19 goal difference over the course of 6 matches. Trinidad and Tobago has been to 1 World Cup ever, but their football performances have been falling backwards. They've been getting worse. And then there's Jamaica, who I could best describe as CONCACAF's Tottenham. They've been to a bunch of finals for tournaments. They've had a bunch of good players. And yet somehow they've never actually been able to do anything. They just get close to doing things. Now, for Jamaicans, this group was the easiest draw of all time. The fact that Jamaica is not at this World Cup instead is the biggest failure in World Cup qualifying for anyone, including Nigeria, especially considering the way all this played out for Curaçao. At the start of this qualifying, Curaçao drew Trinidad and Tobago on the road. It's a perfectly fine result. But in their second match, they played a match that was so that I became convinced that they were not going to be able to get through to the World Cup at all, that they weren't really a threat. Because in a game against Bermuda, with a 2-0 lead at home thanks to a couple of goals from Tahith Chong, they did not break the deadlock until the 75th minute. They struggled in this game. But the good news for them is their next match was against Jamaica. And somehow Jamaica showed up in Willemstad and got raked over the coals 2-0 by a suddenly emergent Curaçao. At this point, the flares were going off. Everybody was locked in because Curaçao was top of the group after the first round of matches with 7 points from 3. And Jamaica all of a sudden had to lock in as well because I'm sure they couldn't believe they were in on this again. But then Curaçao kind of blew it. They were at home with the lead against Trinidad and Tobago, and the Trinidadians and the Tobagoans, not really fair that you get both of them in there, they came back for the draw. Final 2 matches, Curaçao on 8 points from 4 matches and inconceivably sitting within reach of the World Cup, but it still felt incredibly unlikely. That's when you realize that Curaçao was ready for business. They went to Bermuda and won 7-0. They locked in. They locked in and they hunkered down, and this produced one of the great matches of the final round of qualifying, a home match for Jamaica, who's been to 1 World Cup ever, despite the level of players they've been able to have. I mean, just recently, they've had guys like Leon Bailey and Michael Antonio pre-accident come through this team. MLS legends like Donovan Ricketts and Andre Blake manning the goal, Damian Lowe. This is a team of guys that have, high-level footballing experience, evidenced by their multiple cup finals and CONCACAF competitions. But this had to be their moment. The stadium was packed. There were people sitting on the roof, hanging on flagpoles to be able to see in this stadium. Kingston and all of Jamaica was ready to celebrate, and they couldn't fucking score. They hit the post multiple times. They could not score. Curaçao held on, they defended their ass off, and they managed to get as good as they got in this game. But by the end of this game, it was a Jamaican siege. They just couldn't score. And all Curaçao needed was a draw. Because of that win over Bermuda and some struggles for Jamaica in their previous game. This was it. It was the draw that sent them through. And the man that was lauded more than any other was this man, Dick Advocaat. He is a legendary, tenured, 78-year-old coach who was born right at the end of World War II, who had taken on Curaçao as his personal project. And no more, I don't think there's a single person more responsible for Curaçao being able to take the leap from a CONCACAF level like contender to actual World Cup qualification than this man right here. The saddest thing is that after Curaçao qualified for the World Cup, he resigned because of the health of his daughter. And so the talismanic leader who had inspired this Curaçaoan team to an unthinkable result at Jamaica in order to get the automatic spot and go to the World Cup was then without its leader. And they promptly showed up in the FIFA series and lost to China 2-0 and Australia 5-1 and looked like they were in a complete tailspin, showing up and getting blown out 9-0 by Germany. But then something amazing happened. Dick came back. Dick Advocaat is back. Very recently, like after I started making these videos. So if Curaçao had been Group A, you wouldn't have even learned about this because I would have already made the video. Dick Advocaat is back. He's been reappointed just for the tournament, and then he will leave again. Apparently, unfortunately, good news, the recovering health of his daughter. So he's back with the team. And so this team that showed up at this FIFA series, right, and lost to fellow World Cup team Australia, lost to non-World Cup team China at that FIFA series, we're not going to get that team. We're going to get a different team. We're going to get the team coached by Dick Advocaat that was able to play way above its skis in order to get this result. I am encouraged to throw these results out and stick with what we know. And the funny thing is, even what we know is that this Curaçao team is a long shot. They're 100-1 at the Kentucky Derby, probably to even get a point. I love watching them play, but this team is a bona fide underdog when they take the field against Jamaica. And Jamaica showed up at the Intercontinental Playoff and lost to DR Congo. DR Congo is not coming into this tournament as one of the favorites, and that's a team that Curaçao did not look as good against as DR Congo did. Now, who are the key players? Who are the guys to watch out for in this national team? I know that would be the question. You want to look at their last match against Jamaica to give you a hint about who you're going to get. Now, there's one key guy that was missing from this call-up. He was hurt. It was big news at the time, and it thought it might cost them, and that is somebody I've already mentioned, Tahith Chong. Tahith Chong is the, only world-class academy-developed player that Curaçao is going to be able to call on, right? This is a guy that came up at Manchester United, made 5 appearances, apparently, for Manchester United. He's bounced around the English leagues, but continues to play at a high level, and he was born in Willemstad, Curaçao. He was born in Willemstad, Curaçao before moving to the Netherlands for his footballing career. He was like 10 or 11. So he's the guy that has the name brand recognition, that has for lack of a better term, just the je ne sais quoi of being, a big academy guy that can play in this team. He's not the only one with big league experience, though, because you can rock up with the Bacuna bros. Leandro Bacuna and Juninho Bacuna. They both play for the national team, and they have for a while. Because even though this is a new national team, you can see 70 caps for Leandro Bacuna. When I was managing the Curaçao national team in Football Manager 14 as an exercise in interest, as you progress through the game, the Bacuna brothers were there. They were available. They were the hot stuff that you could convince to play for Curaçao. And Leandro's been playing with the team for literally a decade. Right, this is a guy that was at Aston Villa at one point. He plays in Turkey now, but he's somebody that, in many senses, is keeping his career alive in order to be able to play for this national team. This was really the last World Cup that he was going to have a shot at. It was the last one. and he managed to help guide his team there. He is the captain, and he is somebody that can play in a couple of different positions. When you look at how Curaçao lined up in this particular spot, they put the Bacuna bros on each side. The striker, big physical guy named Jurgen Lacadia, right? He plays as a traditional number 9, plays for Miami FC in the USL, which is the second division of the United States. And on the back line, there is somebody there as well. Armando Obispo is a center back that actually plays at PSV, which is one of the best outfits in the Netherlands, right? So it's somebody that they can rely on, somebody who, at least when he shows up at the World Cup and is playing against these types of players like the Bacuna brothers, like Tahith Chong, he's not going to be he's not going to be in a dramatic learning experience. He's going to be familiar with the types of players he's playing against. He's going to have played against them before, and that is just a huge mental advantage. But listen, anybody telling you these guys are semi-pro, or like when Tahiti showed up at the Confed Cup and had a bunch of dudes that were like coconut farmers on their team, that's a lie, right? Because even the guys that maybe I'm not highlighting on this team, like Sanche Hansen, right, or the midfielder Comanencia, I can't remember his first name, plays in Switzerland, right? These guys do play professional football at a high level. And the guys that round out this team, some are coming from the USL in the United States, some are coming from other Dutch teams like Den Bosch, right? But they're professional footballers. They're professional footballers at a level way above most professional footballers, whether they're playing in Eredivisie or MLS or whatever. And they are going to be able to give themselves a chance. But I don't see any reasonable reach for them to actually be able to get out of this group. I think giving themselves a chance means I do think they'll get a goal, right? The two things that you want at your first World Cup, a goal and a point. I think they will get a goal. I think a point is going to be hard to come by. The biggest advantage that Curaçao has is they proved in their World Cup qualifying they can grind, right? They got a lot of heart. They're tough as hell. They are not small, right? They can grind out results, and they will follow Dick Advocaat into hell itself, right? Like that's the relationship between the manager and this team, and the fact he is back is everything. Okay, and they're going up against a couple teams in Ivory Coast and Ecuador who are, that's kind of their identity too, is grinding it and grinding it and grinding it and grinding it. Now their first match is Germany, and I think if they can, get through the first 15, 20 minutes of that match without allowing a goal, then we're going to see what Curaçao is capable of. But if that snowballs on them, you might just lose their heads before they get to the next couple of matches. But if Ecuador in particular, who kind of struggles to get forward at times, finds themselves not in a good goal-scoring day, that might be a team that's vulnerable to a team with the kind of dedication that Curaçao has shown. But they're going to need some of their guys to do some really special things if they're going to get a win or if they're going to get to the round of 32. Fortunately for them, whether it's Tahith Chong or Sanche Hansen or Bacuna free kick or whatever, there are a couple of options and guys that you could point to where it is feasibly possible. But they are a 100-1.